Hi, everyone. So we will get started shortly. I see in the poll that we have people from Canada, of course, the UK, Japan, the Philippines, Switzerland, and other countries. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Of course, the webinar is entitled Speak Up to help raise the game for clean sport. We are going to get started slowly. We still have people joining, but we'll get started regardless. Today, we'll discuss, of course, the Speak Up platform and how WADA's Intelligence and Investigation Department works with confidential sources. A few reminders before we dive into the topic. This webinar is being recorded. You can ask your questions at any time in the Q&A functionality in Teams. Most of the questions will be addressed at the end of this webinar, but some may be integrated within the discussion. You can ask your questions in English or in French, although the webinar is in English. And you will all receive the recording after the webinar, including all of the links to the tools, the videos, the resources that will be mentioned. So don't worry about that. You will receive it after. And the webinar will be structured as a Q&A discussion rather than a more formal presentation. The discussion is, of course, with Gunter, Damien, and Tony. And now let's get started. If you can please introduce yourselves, Gunter, Damien, and Tony.
Okay, then I'll start. Thank you very much, Isolde. My name is Gunter Younger. I'm a police officer from Germany, and I'm currently the head of the Intelligence Investigations Department of WADA. I welcome everyone, and I saw your Philippines and Japan, so it might be 9 o'clock in the evening. So take your beer or whatever you wanna have, or popcorn, and enjoy the next 45 minutes.
I'll go next. Good morning from Montreal, everyone. My name is Damien Larin, and I'm the head of WADA's Confidential Information Unit, which is the section within the I&I department that manages confidential sources or whistleblowers and their information. And I'm really looking forward to sharing a little bit about our program, who we are, and what we do. So thanks for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Cunningham, and I'm a senior manager in the education department here at WADA with responsibility for policy and social science research. And the reason I'm joining this webinar today is to speak to some of the research that has been conducted in relation to this topic, and really looking forward to sharing it all and receiving any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Just one additional comment. Of course, we're discussing the topic mostly from the perspective of athletes and their entourage. But any questions are welcome. If you're a different group or have more knowledge of the field, of course, you can ask any questions that you'd like. So let's get started. First, perhaps a question for Gunter. What does the Intelligence and Investigations Department do at WADA?
Thank you, Isolde. Perhaps before I answer this question, what we do, may I give you some background information on our department? I mean, in 2015, the then new WADA code allowed the WADA to conduct its own investigations, which was not possible before 2015. And as the Russian scandal hit the media, WADA's independent commission was the first organization, more or less, using this power to investigate into Russia and the IAAF at the time, now World Athletics. We all know the outcome and that it has shocked the entire sport world. But the bright side of this scandal was that WADA not only acknowledged the great added value of investigations for clean sport, but also decided to create its own I&I Intelligence Investigations Department in 2016. From then on, we built it up from scratch, including our own confidential source management and our own hotline Speak Up. We have continued investing significantly in our I&I capacity and capabilities since 2016. And I think, or I believe, that we are currently the biggest I&I unit in the sport world. But coming back to your question, what we do, to make it short, we investigate individual anti-doping rule violations, but we primarily focus on serious and organized doping or code non-compliance allegations. But we also support other anti-doping organizations with their investigations. We help building networks in the I&I world, and we organize training sessions. That's in a nutshell what we do.
Thank you, Gunter. Perhaps a question for Tony now. Of course, confidential sources or informants are our key topic for today. What do we know about the experiences of confidential sources, and what does the research say?
Thanks, Isolt. I guess a bit of background in terms of the research as well, and following on from what Gunter has said. In line with the development of I&I within WADA, what we wanted to do and support this process and this development from the social science research side is we wanted to understand a bit more about the landscape of confidential sources or whistleblowing as what we were saying then. We wanted to understand the experiences of athletes and other people that go through the process and also their knowledge and beliefs. So what we did in 2017 is commission 3 universities to look into these exact topics. We had Leeds Beckett University in the UK, Aristotle University in Greece, and the National Sports Academy in Madagascar all look at this topic from different angles. And it really did provide us with some great insight into exactly the landscape, what was happening in relation to whistleblowing and confidential sources. But I think one of the things that was really interesting is that the Leeds Beckett project went beyond its remit and developed videos to illustrate the stories and experiences of athletes that went through a whistleblowing or confidential sources process. And that really kind of served as an inspiration to kind of for us to look at how can we support some of the issues that arose during that. During those stories and through the research. Now, the experiences that came through there weren't directly related to WADA's program or how WADA develops this program, but it was seen as an opportunity to possibly address some of those issues. Some of the issues that came forward was one of the things around the burden of knowing. We know that the majority of athletes are clean and intend to stay clean. But we also know that there's a certain percentage of athletes that then may become aware of doping behaviors either by a competitor or a peer. So even that knowledge alone can create a great burden on athletes and what to do. And what we discovered as well from the research is that there's very little knowledge about what people can do, where the avenues and channels are to, say, report the behavior. And there's also very little in the way of skills or competencies into know how to report. So we saw this as a bit of a gap in terms of the programs that were there available, and also gives an opportunity to highlight WADA's program and how it addresses some of these issues. For example, one of the issues that was highlighted by athletes was the lack of support throughout the process that they received from certain organizations. This is very much a strength of WADA's program. And through some of the videos that were subsequently developed on our side, that allows us to kind of help athletes go through that. And I think Damien and Gunter are going to talk to that a little bit more about how that process works. But that's how I guess the research informed what we're looking to do, and I'm happy to discuss or answer questions more about what that research says as part of the webinar. I hope that answers the question, but if there's anything else, just let me know.
Thank you, Tony. And we will share the links to some of the research reports as part of the follow-up email as well. Now, Damien, if I am an athlete and I come across a potential doping case or misconduct, what are my options?
As you can imagine, that's a question I feel pretty often, and it can be pretty overwhelming for an athlete, a coach, etc., someone who has seen something and doesn't know what to do with it. Each situation is unique, so all the options are kind of tailor-made to each person's situation. So what we like to do is we really try and simplify it. Contact us. That's the first step. Often people burden themselves with all these different choices and options, but the best thing to do is to contact us. We'll get into a little bit more into how people can do that later on in the webinar. But contact us. We're going to counsel you. We're going to guide you on what your specific options are. Sometimes we're not best placed to pursue the information and to investigate, but we work with a whole network of trusted partners, ADOs, NADOs, IFs, who can potentially pursue the information, or might be a better place to do it. I guess maybe I would end with my answer by providing a little bit of advice in terms of if someone were in that situation. So the 3 pieces of advice that I would give them is, first, when they do contact us, is to provide as much detail as possible, because that really helps us better understand what their options are and what their situation is. The other thing is to ask questions. A big part of understanding what to do in these situations is being well informed. So ask a lot of questions. And then the last thing I would say is for people to stay in touch, because we need to ask questions and we never know, how cases will develop. So those are, hopefully that answered the question, but those are some of the things that we think about and we reflect upon. We try and simplify it to basically contact us, and we'll provide guidance.
Thank you. You mentioned the Speak Up platform, which is a great way to reach your team. Can you tell us more about that platform?
Absolutely. So our Speak Up tool is our global reporting platform. It's accessible through our webpage, and it's also accessible through a mobile app. Essentially what it is it's a communications program. It's what allows the public to communicate with us and allows us to communicate with the public, so we can exchange in a dialogue. It's important to note a few key elements of the program. First of all, it's secure. All the information goes on to a secure and encrypted server. It's confidential, which obviously I'm at the head of the confidential information unit. It's something we take very seriously within my unit. And it also has the option of being anonymous, and maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that because it's a key component in how we process information. We allow people to contact us anonymously, but our great preference is for people to reveal their identity. And the reason I say this is because it allows us to better maximize their information. It allows us to understand the context of where they're coming from. It also allows us to better protect their confidentiality, believe it or not, when we know who they are, because it allows us to assess the impact of the various steps we might take. I mentioned confidentiality is something we take very seriously. It's really something we're a little bit obsessed about in my unit. And maybe I would just say that, so even if people reveal their name or their identity, or even they choose to provide how they receive that information, it's kept within our secure system within SpeakUp. And if we increase our collaboration and people become whistleblowers, we have a standalone secure database called our CIU secure database, which has an even heightened level of security. So it's really kind of the core part of our business is protecting people's identities and their information.
Thank you. So if I understand correctly, even if I were to reveal my identity to your team, it remains with your team. It doesn't mean that my identity as a whistleblower or confidential source is revealed generally to the public or to the media.
Yeah, that's a good comment, because it allows me to explain a little bit about how we compartmentalize the information. So the information is compartmentalized within our own department. So we have 2 principal units. We have the confidential information unit, which is where I work, and we have the investigations unit. And so within our own unit, there's a need to know. So even people within the unit, if they don't need to know the identities, they won't. But then we have a barrier between us and the investigations unit. And the investigations unit, although they receive information from confidential sources, they do not know the identities of those sources. So that's just a little bit about how the type of strong measures we take to protect people's identities.
Great, thank you. Another question for Gunter now. Do reports from individuals really make a difference to protect clean sport?
That's a very good question, Isolde. And perhaps at the very beginning, when we had contact with some individuals or with some confidential sources, they had the feeling that the information they provided is so minor, not relevant at all. But what people don't realize is that it's only a small puzzle from the whole picture, and we have other sources. So the more we receive, the more it corroborates whether it's true or not. So therefore, we highlight or we encourage everyone to come forward, even if it's something minor that the person has realized. and whether it has an impact, and I can clearly say yes, because every single investigation, there was no investigation in the I&I department that has not benefited from information received from our sources. So therefore, the coming forward and speaking to us and telling us what they know helps us in every step, even in the strategy developing. To give you another example, I mean, just with the help of our sources, our department has been instrumental to charge more than 350 athletes, coaches, or officials in the past 6 years, which is tremendous, I find. And unfortunately, and really, I say that with a heart, with some pain in my heart, that we will never be able to pay tribute to all of them as they would have deserved it, because we don't want to endanger their security or maintain their confidentiality. But they are in the back, and they are doing a great job for clean sport. But these sessions like this helps us, of course, to highlight their invaluable contributions. I know, and I've been working in this area for many years now. It's a very big decision, and it's very unsure what happens to the information, etc. But we have many steps to make sure that every source feels comfortable, and this is the first step. Everyone should be comfortable. They should know what's going on, and what Damien just said, ask questions. You should feel comfortable. Only when you feel comfortable, we go ahead with working with you. Because if this is not the case, then at one stage it's going to be a problem for you, and we don't want to avoid that. If you're not comfortable, my team will always stop and address first those issues and concerns before we move on. And even if you don't want to move on, it's also okay. It's your decision. You are in control. In every step of the process, there's always a discussion between the source and the source handler and the confidential source. And your source handler is the voice in the investigation. It's not even you coming forward. It's your source handler with you discussing what can be shared and what is dangerous. So we are fully aware how important this step-by-step approach is for everyone, because this decision of you coming forward can make a very big difference for clean athletes. It's a partnership with the same goals and synergies on both sides. We know our department and our confidential information unit would not exist without our brave confidential sources.
Thank you. And before we go on to the next question for this discussion, I see that some people have raised their hands. If you can please ask your questions or make your comments in the Q&A. Everyone has their microphones and cameras disabled because we're recording this webinar. Thank you. Next question would be again for Damien. What happens after I have sent a report through Speak Up? What would be the next steps?
So I'd like to talk a little bit about our 7-step confidential source process, but I think I just want to build a little bit on what Gunter said first, and talk about a little bit about who we are as a team. So I'm here representing the confidential information unit. And I think it's important that you understand who we are, because our process is really only as strong as the people behind it. So I work with a team of dedicated confidential information managers. That's what we call them. And they're experienced intelligence professionals. So they have many years of experience working with confidential sources and their information. And as Gunter underlined, they're really there to guide people through the process. So Isolde, I don't know if you could maybe bring up the graphic with our 7-step process, and then I'll briefly take everyone through it. I'll have to be a little bit succinct, and I want to emphasize just a few key parts of it. So as you can see, it's 7 steps. The first step is disclosure of misconduct, and that's just when we receive the information through our Speak Up platform. The second step is information assessment, and that's really where we just start doing our database checks, and we start kind of developing our information gaps. So step 3, I'd like to emphasize, and that's that virtual or in-person interview. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens much of the time. And it's really our first opportunity as a confidential information manager to get a sense of who we're working with, right? So you as an informant has written us. It allows us to ask some questions, start that dialogue, and start to build the trust that we'd like to establish between each other. It's also our informant's first opportunity to get to know us. So it's really a key part of how we build kind of going forward. The second, the next step, step 4, is where we decide whether we're best placed to investigate, or maybe a partner, a trusted partner is better placed to do so. And then step 5 is another part that I want to emphasize. And that's when we decide whether to grant whistleblower status. So this isn't something that we take lightly. When someone first contacts us, we classify them as an informant. And if we see a potential for working closer together and upping our cooperation, we'll offer whistleblower status. And I say offer because it's not something within our system where we dictate. We really decide together with the informant whether they want to increase their cooperation. It kind of ups our trust and what we can do. And so it's really about building that partnership together. Step 6, ongoing communications, is really that operational phase of our work. We might be communicating with our sources on a daily basis, definitely on a weekly basis, and a lot of information is coming in. We're providing guidance, and we're passing that information on to our investigators, who will hopefully be using it to inform their investigation. Now, the last step, step 7, is when an investigation is closed. We don't necessarily see that as the closure of our source relationship. We keep in touch. There may be reasons why a source needs additional support from us, but we also never know what kind of other avenues might open themselves up in the future. Maybe our sources will have access to more information in the future that can help us pursue other investigations. So really, this process is about kind of that pre-investigation process when people contact us, what we do with their information and how we up that cooperation. And then really important not to forget the end of the process, right? How do we deal with our sources? How do we work with them when an investigation is closed? Hopefully that was a good summary for everyone.
Thank you, Damien. And that further clarifies also what we mean by a confidential source or informant or whistleblower, which we sometimes use interchangeably, but also have a different meaning within that process and how you work with the informants. And another question for you, actually, Damien. How do athletes know if they should contact WADA or their anti-doping organization or maybe law enforcement? What is the rationale behind that?
I mean, it's similar to the first question you asked me. I mean, each situation is unique, so it's difficult to say in a certain let's say informant circumstances which one is best. I think I'm gonna borrow a little bit from that first answer as well and say, feel free to contact us. That's what we're here for. We're here to guide you and counsel you. We can refer you to the right organization. As I said, we have quite a large network of trusted partners. We work with many stakeholders across the world. The one thing I would highlight with that, though, is for prospective sources, is to let us know if you or they have contacted other organizations. Number one, because we don't want to duplicate the work that's been done. And number two, there's a lot that goes into protecting someone's confidentiality. And if we can work with another organization where you've already revealed your identity to them, it really simplifies the process for us. Maybe the last thing I would say about that is that we don't just work with other organizations. In certain cases, we really work hard to build their capacity to provide guidance and advice on their programs. I think Gunter alluded to that in his first answer, in terms of our organization doing a lot of capacity building and being one of the leaders in this space. So it's something we take really to heart, and we like to build those really strong partnerships, which I think allows us to better serve the public and serve those prospective confidential sources.
Thank you. I see that we have quite a few questions already. So before we get into the questions, perhaps another question for you, Gunter. I know that WADA has a project going on right now with the Intelligence and Investigations Department that is co-funded by the European Commission to help build capacity in I&I anti-doping organizations in Europe. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the project and perhaps explain what it means for athletes and how we can support them?
Yeah, thank you, Isolde. And it's just Damien said, I think it's in particular in the I&I world, it's so important to have a network. And it's also not enough if WADA gets stronger and stronger and we build up more and more capacity if our anti-doping organizations or partners have no or very few skills. So we need to level that up. So in the second phase of our initiatives, we thought we should do more on capacity and capability building, meaning helping our anti-doping organizations to have more I&I capacities, etc., etc. So this is why we made a proposal to the European Commission last year, and we were very proud that the European Commission not only acknowledged the great value of I&I work for clean sport, but also supported our proposals to build up and strengthen I&I capabilities in European countries in the next 2 years with a grant of 1.4 million euro, which is, I think, a huge amount of money that the European Commission granted to our initiative. So we are very proud of that. What we aim is that we either create or enlarge I&I teams at the national anti-doping organizations of the 48 European countries and bring them together with their respective law enforcement counterparts. Because in our world, we need to use every mean that we have in order to fight doping, and law enforcement have different power. They have other means that they can use. But what they're lacking is the knowledge of sport, and we have the knowledge of sport, but we are lacking of some of the power that law enforcement has. So I think to build up the synergies, and we've been working with more than 10, now almost 15 law enforcement agencies worldwide and supporting the investigation. We see as well the demand from them more and more coming towards us, and we want to build that alliance. And that helps as well what Damien just said. If a source, an informant comes to us, we will have a network with the right law enforcement, with the right contact. So you don't have to go and find the right person for you, which is quite painful sometimes. So this is what we want. We have 2 big networks on confidential source management, and Damien can talk about it, or on investigation and analytical support. So that, I think the bigger the network, the stronger we are, and the more we can do in order to help to clean sport or to clean out the sport where it's necessary. We want the idea is that to share information and to work together makes it much more easier than to fight doping and to use information, because there's a lot out there and people want to talk, but so far we don't have the resources yet to really follow up every information that we receive. One important element of this training is as well the confidential management, because this was in our questionnaire that we sent already to our NAROs, was one of the highlights, saying we want to know how to manage sources professionally so that we gain trust from them. So, but if you're interested in the project, I mean, you can go on our website and or reach out directly to me, and I'm happy to provide you with more information on that.
Thank you, Gunter. We aim to finish the webinar at 45 past the hour, so we have about 15 minutes left. Before we get into the questions, Tony, Gunter, and Damien, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Tony, are you starting? Yeah.
I can jump. We can all jump in together. But yeah, there was just a couple of things I was noting as both Damien and Gunter were speaking, and it's related to the research as well, and maybe it touches on a couple of questions that have been asked in the chat. One is around the language that we discovered from the research, is that we, as you mentioned, use whistleblower, sources, informants interchangeably. And one of the insights from the research is possibly the stigma that's related to even the term whistleblower. And you may have noticed that both Gunter and Damien actually didn't use the term whistleblower all throughout while they were speaking, until Damien was talking about the 7 steps. And you don't actually get to become a whistleblower until step 5, until, as Damien said, you work with the informant or the confidential source, and those people are comfortable with that. So it was something, again, as just to pick up on, is the preciseness of language. And I even noticed in one of the questions, the term whistleblower is put in quotation marks. And that's just something to be aware of as we're looking to encourage people to come forward if they are aware of doping behaviors. The other point is obviously something that was highlighted in the research is I guess the lack of knowledge or the lack of skills to come forward. One of the things that's now, as a result of the research and the recommendations, was to mandate education around speaking up. So for in the code now, in Article 18.2, it is mandated as part of an education program that athletes and athlete support personnel have to be educated around the idea of speaking up, coming forward, so that they're, first of all, aware. And the second part, and just as important, is that they know the procedures and processes that they can go through in the different channels that are available to them. And that education should address certain things that have already been raised here, is around addressing some concerns that they may have, highlighting the support that they would receive, for example, if they came to WADA through Speak Up. And I guess one of the concerns they have as well is around their identity and anonymity. And another word that's been mentioned a lot today is around confidentiality and the importance of that, and the importance of recognizing that they are in control throughout the process, and it's very much a two-way street in relation to the whole process. So I think that they were just a couple of things that came up as you were speaking.
Gunter, if it's okay with you, I'll jump in real quick and you can have the last word. Okay. I know we're a little short for time. We want to leave some time for questions, so I'll make it quick. Isolde, I knew you'd ask me this. I knew you'd give us the last word. So I thought of 3 elements I think are really key to our program. The first one is trust. And I think that's something we can't repeat enough. It's really important to have trust between ourselves and our confidential sources. And we're cognizant that it's not something that's freely given. It's something that needs to be earned. And the best way to earn it is by being transparent, by being professional, and by informing people about our process. So I think that's what echoes a little bit what Tony just said. The second part is partnership. That's really fundamental to how we do our business. We understand that in a partnership, both people bring something to the table. On our side, we bring our expertise, our guidance, our knowledge of the system. And on the other side, our sources bring knowledge of the media, if they're athletes, the sport they're practicing in, coaches of sport, of their personal circumstances, of the key individuals that might be involved in doping activity. And together, then we make a good team. So I think that's what I wanted to highlight, partnership. And the last thing really quickly is, what do we want to do with this? Like, ultimately, we want to maximize the impact of your information, but we also want to ensure we're not sacrificing your confidentiality and your security. And that's my ultimate challenge. That's our goal. And I think we've been pretty successful with that. We know you contact us with your information because you want us to do something with it, but you also don't want to be put front and center. So our goal is to really make sure we can maximize that information, but allow you to go back to your normal lives, allow you to be in the background, to be well supported in that process. And so that's what we aim to do. And I would say those are the 3 kind of key elements that I think of or goals I think of when I think of our confidential source program.
Perhaps to finish up, perhaps start with trust, and one thing that especially Damien's team can be really proud. We have received from the beginning more than 1,500 reports since launch of Speak Up, and none of our whistleblowers have been disclosed to the media. And we could charge more than 350 athletes or coaches or officials in the last 6 years. And we see in the, it's coincidentally I had to do some figures this morning, and the Speak Up hotline is the popularity is increasing. So we have more than 40% this year, every month, more messages than last year. So that shows that people that come to us, they trust us, and which is perfect, and we want to gain that trust. The other thing is the control, is that you are in control of your information. You can walk away anytime if you want, and we respect that. We will not question that because we know how difficult it is. And I think this feeling that you have, you're in partner with our CIU, you are in control of the information. You can be sure that your confidentiality, even if the case goes down the drain, if I may so, we would not endanger your confidentiality. And I think that is something that we will never disappoint you in this respect.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Damien, Tony, and Gunter. Before we get into the questions, just one last comment. We have created a series of 4 videos that cover the same topics that we discussed this morning. They are available on our YouTube channel, and we will share them in the follow-up email as well. So that would be very helpful for anyone who wants to find out more. And now let's get into the questions. Our first question, we have someone asking if you can offer advice on how educators in the field can deal with face-to-face disclosures, especially if the whistleblower or the informant is not keen to use any of the online communication tools that are available.
It's almost like it's a question for Tony and I, because I think that the questionnaire asked about educators in the field. So I don't know, Tony. I mean, in that sense, perhaps an educator that might be giving a workshop or something of that nature, and how to guide them. Maybe you could start with that, and then I could quickly mention how we might deal with someone who doesn't want to write to us.
Yeah, I think, and this is maybe something for anti-doping organizations, for all of their staff to be aware, as well as educators, about what happens or a process for that. But as education, as I mentioned, is mandated as part of an education program, the educators should first of all be aware of the processes that are there, and be fully briefed on what they can do and the advice that they can offer athletes to that point. In terms of them knowing, and then the next steps, I guess that's where the different options for Speak Up, and maybe where you could offer advice on how they would deal with that.
I think so. Obviously, there needs to be an initial point of contact to be able to, to gather information, to provide guidance, right? I think the main thing I would highlight would be to have flexible systems. So we have a Speak Up tool, and it's available to everyone. It's secure, it's encrypted, but we have a whole other toolbox that we can put into play if someone wants to speak to us, and that could include secure phone calls, secure messaging. It can include face-to-face meetings. It can include potentially, if someone is really nervous, working through a trusted intermediary, right? So they could potentially speak to someone in their network, maybe who's a little bit outside of that immediate doping circle, who could speak to us. So we have a lot of flexibility in our system, and I think that's something that I would maybe counsel other ADOs is sometimes people get a little too married to the system that they use. Just keep in mind there are other ways of initiating that first contact, and that first contact is the most important one, because without it, you don't really know what you're dealing with, the breadth of the information, and how to provide guidance to that potentially that source who's potentially in a compromising position. So hopefully that answered the question, but I think there's a lot of options as always.
Thank you. We'll take the next question. We have a question regarding what an informant should do if they want to report illegal anti-doping movement by a federation. Should they use also Speak Up? And if there's such misconduct from an organization rather than an individual, what are the next steps? How does it work?
Gunter, do you want to? Yeah, maybe you could. Yeah.
Of course, you are more than happy to use the Speak Up link. We investigate as well. We have non-compliance allegations. We have almost 20% of our allegations are compliance related. My belief, and to comment on that, it's usually not the organization that is bad. It's usually some people in the organization that abuse the system in the organization, and we are not happy, but we are always keen on getting our sport community clean, because they are bad for the reputation for all of us. In this respect, I want to highlight as well, Our department is independent. Therefore, even if any investigation we start, I don't have to inform anyone, not the management, not the president, not the exco, not the foundation board. And as you might know, we have even investigated 2 board members at one stage when we had the allegations. So therefore, whatever in this respect, when if it's very sensitive, reach out to me or to the team, to Damien, and we find a way how to process it and how to get the information to our department.
Thank you, Gunter. We have another question regarding how anti-doping used to rely heavily on testing, and now investigations and intelligence have really grown in terms of importance to prevent doping. How do testing and investigations work together?
Will I do again?
Yeah, I might add a few words, but yeah, Gunter, go for it.
I mean, testing will remain one of the most important tools for sport. But if you look at the statistic and it's 0.67 positive hit rate, I think it was necessary to find new tools in order to make our system stronger. And therefore, we go hand in hand. So we get information and intelligence from the testing because we get information from DCOs on the spot, which is very important for us. We had several investigations where we used that. On the other side, with the intelligence that we receive, we inform the testing department in different from different stakeholders in order to guide them what they should test and in which direction should they. I think we can do a bit better, but for this, we need first to build up the I&I capacity in the different organizations so that they can work more hand in hand. It works in our organization. It works in particular, I can say that with the ITA, for instance, when we had cases, it works very well. It's a strong partner and it's a good model that we want to multiplicate for other organizations as well.
Maybe I just add quickly. I think I'd echo what Gunter says. A lot of our, let's say, our clients are internal, right? So a lot of our clients for our information are internal WADA departments. One of which is the most important. One of the more important ones is obviously testing. And I would say it's a two-way street in the sense that for us to be able to collect effective intelligence, ask important questions about products and about opportunities for effective testing, we need to work closely with our testing department, right? They're the subject matter experts. I agree, it's probably something that we can continue to increase and become a little bit more symbiotic, but those things are already happening, and I see it particularly with the more complex areas like the ABP teams and things like that. We're often in contact with them to better understand the intelligence we receive, but also projecting forward how we can work with those sources to provide lead intelligence to our own testing department, but I would say more so to all the ADOs out there that receive our intelligence.
Thank you. And we'll take just one last question, although we are reaching really the end of this webinar, and I understand that some people may have to log off already. So our last question would be, sport is ever more a global business. Do individual reporting platforms throughout the various stakeholder organizations complicate matters for potential informants and increase the risk of compromise? And has any thought been given to a single global reporting platform that would be managed by WADA? I'm not sure who this one would be for.
Can I answer,
yeah,
Damien? Because I see it's David who answered that question. It might be a conflict as you know each other. No, just kidding. David, very good question. One of the, and perhaps Tony can complement that statement. What we learned is that informants would like to have as many ways to communicate. Some people, they are comfortable with the WADA platform, some not, and they use others. I think we should not have one platform, which is as well would be a huge burden on one organization, but as many platforms as possible, because we want to reach as many clients as possible. The challenge is then behind the platform, meaning we need to make sure that we are connected among ourselves of the organization, so that a whistleblower comes forward, that is protected but can be shared with other organizations. Information can be shared with other informations, so that we behind the platform have a network that can follow up every allegation, and as well that the whistleblower is not obliged to go to different organizations, but can be dealt with in one hand and followed up by them. So that would be my answer for that.
And just to add, as Gunter, you mentioned me as well from the research. Yes, different options are preferable, and because it comes back to trust, and different athletes or people may have different levels of trust for different channels or different organizations or who they're more comfortable with. But also, obviously, if there's increased number of platforms or channels, that requires more education to make sure that people are informed. And a lot of the questions I see are coming to what do I do if, trying to ask questions. So it speaks to, and of course I'm going to say this, is the importance of education and making sure people are educated and informed. WADA is and always will be a step, as Damien has illustrated, as a first step that you can always come to. But if you do need to, as an athlete, stay informed, or as an organization, there's also a resource there as well on our e-learning platform, Adele. There is a module on speaking up as a resource that you can always point people to as well. And it helps towards that idea of education and making sure that people are informed about the different options that they do have.
Great. Thanks again, Tony, Damien, and Gunter. Thank you, Lovna, who's working in the background, but really doing a lot of work as well. And just a few reminders, the recording will be sent to all of you along with the links for the different resources and tools that we mentioned. Please do share any feedback that you have on this webinar. You can always contact the INI team via the website or in the webinar feedback as well. And you can share with the comms or the INI team any suggestions for future topics or webinars that you might have in mind. And that would be it. Thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.